Thanks for joining us. You're watching Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. Today we have Frost and Sullivan with us. Hazmi Yusof is the MD of Malaysia. Hazmi, we spoke a little bit about, before this interview, about the new concept that you guys are bringing forward and for the market to be familiarized with, which is Innovation to Zero.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. What is Innovation to Zero?
Okay. Firstly, thank you for inviting me over, Ibrahim. I'm very happy to be here, very excited. Yes, so Innovate to Zero is a framework, a strategy framework to give company a better understanding of the big picture. Today, disruption is coming in from all sides, right? Markets, industry, the boundaries are getting more and more blur, right? So if you're Kodak, for example, was Kodak aware of the digital revolution that was coming in and that was killing the film industry, which they were leading at some point, right? So today, and also if you look at the music publishing industry, right, were they anticipating digital to come in and disrupt their market? And today, I think there's very few music publishing houses as opposed to the good old days 20 years ago. So it's the same thing with companies today. They are looking at what are the utopian condition for their business, what can disrupt their business. So Innovate to Zero is basically a thinking tool or framework to look at how can their business be disrupted. So me, for example, being in the management, people are saying that in 10, 15 years time with AI, robotics, you don't need an MD.
No, you don't.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to be innovated to zero job, right? So what we do is we put a framework where we work backwards. So what do we have to do to either adapt to that situation, be the first mover in that situation, or we take a position where we wait and see, be the laggard in that position. So all these are scenarios that through this framework we are able to plan better.
So let's talk more about Innovation to Zero. To give a clearer picture, when you say Innovate to Zero, zero to what? For what company?
Okay, so we take any company. Let's take an example. Today, if you go to Europe, and you look at the automotive companies, they are under tremendous pressure to further reduce the carbon emission, right? To a point where they are saying it's not possible to create a diesel engine because of the strict requirement. So Daimler, Mercedes-Benz have decided to say we are going to create zero combustion engine, which basically means that by 2035. So by 2035 there won't be any diesel or petrol engine vehicles from Mercedes-Benz anymore. So that is their Innovate to Zero carbon emission vehicle, for example. So they are working backwards. So they are giving themselves 2035, and they are putting a roadmap where in the next few years we're going to decrease cars or vehicle that has combustion engine as their engine, right? So the stakeholders, the management, everyone else have to rally around that vision that okay, I will have to design a full EV car. So that is one of the example. The other example is actually Coca-Cola. So today everyone is concerned with our sugar intake, and Coca-Cola is one of the, I think, a drink that has the highest amount of sugar. So they say we are going to come out with Innovate to Zero sugar drink, and people are saying, how do you do that? Because Coca-Cola is your bread and butter, and so they come out with Coke Zero. Right? And today, Coke Zero has a bigger market share than Coca-Cola. So those are Innovate to Zero examples. So companies today are looking at one of the examples I can give is AirAsia. So AirAsia were looking at Innovate to Zero emails, because I mean you and I know that the amount of time that we are stuck in front of the laptop writing emails to each other when we can quickly make a call, or email has become a barrier to efficiency in so many ways. So you imagine Air Asia, they decided, like, you know what, we don't need emails. So they are working around internally without one. A company that fly, I don't know how many hundreds of flights a day, doesn't use email. So these are radical steps that they make. I'm sure it didn't happen overnight, but over a period of time, they have moved to another level of efficiency that people don't spend time drafting emails. Right?
All right, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with Frost and Sullivan. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for joining us. You're watching Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. Today I am with Hazmi Yusof, the MD of Frost and Sullivan. How did Frost, I guess, push forward this whole idea of Innovate to Zero? What was the thinking process then?
It's actually, it was first coined by Bill Gates, actually, in 2010 in one of his TED Talks. So he wanted the world to look at carbon footprint. So he coined the term "Innovate to Zero carbon footprint," and so pushing the agenda that let's look at industries moving, addressing this backwards. So like if you are looking at zero carbon footprint in the form of solar energy versus the usual electricity, for example, or you're looking at electric vehicle versus combustion engine, for example. So that is the term coined by Bill Gates in the beginning, and Frost kind of jumped on it, and we created that Innovate to Zero as a model. But many other organizations as well kind of jump on that concept. So United Nations came up with their Sustainable Development Goal (SDG) that has a lot of Innovate to Zero crime, for example, Innovate to Zero poverty, and so on. So it is a framework to say, like, okay, let's aim high. Let's say you don't get rid of 100% crime. If you get rid of 75% crime, that's something, right? So that's how the idea came about.
In translating this, you need a lot of change managers. You need a lot of, I guess, people that can push forward these kind of behavioral modifications. If you
Yes.
And it can be in government, it can be in private. When you talk about these organizations, SDG, mostly government, some of the companies that you spoke of, Asia, Kodak, whatever, Coca-Cola, those are private companies. How to ensure that change managers are directly impacting the kind of modification that they want?
I think firstly, if you look at many instances, companies leverage on technology to drive that change. Number two, just like any change management exercise, it's you got to invest in time, effort, energy, and so on to make that change. So I have the privilege of, for example, working with the Malaysian government on some of this change management, looking at more digital kind of a solution across public service delivery, for example. So all those are, I think, happening on the ground. But a very good example of Innovate to Zero from a government perspective is the Singapore government. So the Inland Revenue Board have decided that, you know what, you don't have to do your tax return, because to have that tax return, can you imagine, for a window of 3-4 weeks, you have to create a bandwidth that can take a sudden wave of
web traffic,
Yes, web traffic, because people want to submit their tax return, and the remaining 10 months, right? That capacity is actually gone to waste. So you spend millions of ringgit providing that infrastructure for only maybe 3-4 weeks, really. So, and the kind of bottleneck required in terms of to process even though now it's all online, to process the income tax return form and so on. So Singapore have decided that, you know what, we can roughly estimate that because most people are employees, right? They're not business people, corporate employees, so on. We can estimate roughly what's your tax return. So we'll do it for you. So if we get it wrong, then you can come in and maybe change the system or change the tax amount. So the scenario is flipped around. So it says that we are going to innovate to zero tax return, and you know the kind of savings the government can make through, you know, you don't require that big capacity to take that kind of traffic anymore, and you know you probably need less people to look through the tax return. So you know you're seeing that in governments as well.
Right? All right, that's a very important way of doing things. But what I'm trying to pin down on is, in order for change to happen, everybody must get on board, from managers to board all the way to the worker. How do you, and perhaps even the consumers outright?
Yes.
How do you get all of them on board this train of change to innovate to zero? From
the way we roll this out, I think there is no shortcut for this. There's you've got to train people from either top down and bottom up, and there's a lot of communication happening to make it possible. So you see companies spend a huge amount of time and effort communicating this across. So it's almost like you put on a loop, you know, that it goes on and on. You keep saying. So, you know, if you Google the soundbite of Philip Morris Innovate to Zero Smoke, you see that, you know, they talk about it, you know, time and time again and again. And I think there's no shortcut to, you know, communication. You know, you have to keep doing it, I guess.
Right. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with Frost and Sullivan. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for staying on with us. You're watching Notepad with me, Ibrahim Sani. Today I'm with Hazmi Yusof, the MD of Forrest & Sullivan Malaysia. Hazmi, let's talk about some of the current ongoings in the country. We're entering well into the third quarter of the year. How are we performing as a country, and what are your views moving forward for this nation?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think if you look at our general performance, I think we are doing okay, because Malaysia, I guess since the day one, we have always been a trading nation. So how we fare has a lot to do with, you know, the global markets, the global trade, and so on. So I think looking at even some of the headwinds that we have in terms of, you know, the China-US trade war, I think we are doing okay. I think we are doing well. But I think government and businesses today, they are fearing that, you know, we need to move up the value chain. I think that's where my experience talking to CEOs in Malaysia, even in the region, companies want to move up the value chain. I'll give you an example. If you are a pharmaceutical company, you provide medicines, for example, you want to move up the value chain where you do not want to be just the contract manufacturing for drugs. You want to create your own brand. You want to create your own platform where in the not so distant future, even medicine will be customized. So today, if you have a headache, you say, I'm going to get 500 milligram of aspirin. In the future, you can actually pin it down to exactly what you need, 455 milligram, for example.
Yeah.
So customization is going to be big. And many companies in Malaysia, knowing that, hey, you know, if I play if I don't move up the value chain, I'll be competing against the likes of Indochina and I cannot compete with those emerging markets in terms of cost, right? So many companies are looking at how do I move from a very cost-centric economy or business model to a value-based business model or economy. I think this is probably the top of mind for businesses, for government that is looking at driving the economy.
But for the longest of time, Malaysian businesses and the government, for that matter, wants to push up the value chain. What's holding us back?
I personally think that we operate in an environment where the intensity of competition is not as high as our neighboring countries. When I go to Indonesia, I find that the companies there are just fitter, right? When you have a stronger competition among yourself, you tend to be in better shape, right? So I don't know, using football as an analogy, Liverpool got better because, or Manchester City got better because there's Liverpool, right? So in Malaysia, I think one of the challenges that we face is that our environment is not as competitive as other countries. I think that is something that it's not an easy solution to.
Yeah, I was trying to think about a quick fix. So how do we get more competition in?
I think without doubt, today we are really talking about a borderless market. So if we are still looking at, I want to do business in Malaysia, I think we're going to be trampled over in the next 10 years. Right? We have to look at a market that is ASEAN. So when we plan our business, we have to go regional. We have to think regional. We have to think global. And if we think domestic, we are going to get really slaughtered by the bigger guys that will come into our market for sure.
And of course, the problem with regionalization or taking the businesses to a regional level is, I guess, hindrances, including freedom of movement. It's not that easy finding a job as a Malaysian in Thailand or in Indonesia without having to go through some hoops. This is not seen in a homogeneous market like the US. If I'm living in Colorado or California, I can easily find a job in New York. That's one thing, it's one country, but it's huge. Another parallel would be the EU because of the freedom of movement. I mean, excluding the UK because they're going through some issues there. But if you're a Frenchman trying to find a job in Spain, go ahead. There's no restrictions right there. Do you think that ASEAN as a regional bloc has to overcome this freedom of movement issue?
Yes, I think that will happen. I think it's a matter of time. I would compare today versus when I was doing this 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I was doing the regional coverage, and I can see today that the amount of people that, let's say Malaysians in Jakarta, Malaysians in Bangkok and so on, it's a lot more than, let's say, even 10 years ago. So people are moving around, but I think there will be more of that as we move forward. There'll be a lot more of that moving forward. Today, for example, you find Indonesians working in multinational companies here, for example. So I think it has started. It has even picked up in terms of number of people moving in and around ASEAN. I think that's definitely happening. But I think Malaysia has a advantage in that sense because we are multilingual. We speak good English, and we are able to play the role of a regional person, right? And those jobs are usually in the past has been very much given to Singaporeans, for example. So if they work for a multinational company, chances are they are covering ASEAN. So they fly to Bangkok, Manila, and so on. Today, we find that companies want to take a more competitive position, so they hire Malaysians because obviously of our kind of a cost advantage, right? And in terms of know-how, capability, we are no different. So I see more and more Malaysians taking up regional role as we move forward.
So to recap, we were talking about Malaysia having some kind of issues as well as advantages, and some of the issues include regionalization. Is there like the biggest challenge that companies in Malaysia need to be really wary of in trying to make this happen? The one or two big thing that we really need to watch out for?
I think if you look at the global trend, and we're not spared from the global trend, large companies are slowly, the number of large enterprises are slowly dwindling. right? Because business moving forward is all about being agile. It's all about having that kind of speed, right? So if you're a large enterprise, you are heavy, and chances are, you know, you carry with you that kind of a cost associated with large enterprises. And I think in Malaysia we need to have more, you know, more dynamic SMEs who can penetrate the you know, the market, our neighboring markets, our Asia market, and so on. Today, you only see the big guys. You see Sime Darby going to Indonesia. You see Axiata going to Indonesia. These are large corporates, large enterprises, right? And the trend in the future is it's nimble, medium-sized companies that you see, you know, playing a more important role in the market.
Right. That was an interesting conversation that I had with Hazmi Yusof, the MD of Frost & Sullivan Malaysia. If you want to watch more of these kind of interviews, just head on to astro.com, search for these interviews there. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ibrahim.
That's a very good one.